Disclaimer, all integrated graphics benchmarks will run at 720p. Once you see the benchmarks, I think you'll understand why. So for today's video, I just wanted to compare Skylake's integrated graphics with the new, obviously, Skylake 14nm series to a cheap discrete video card to see if it's actually worth it to buy a cheap video card. In this instance, I'm using a 750 Ti. Skylake's graphics aren't really meant for gaming. They're more meant for, like watching YouTube videos and streaming 1080p, 1440p, or even 4K content. But it's not really meant for gaming, but we're gonna see what we can actually do for gaming here today. So let's go ahead and start off by comparing the specs. Starting off with the HD 530, which is Skylake's integrated graphics, there is not a lot to say. The HD 530, like I said, wasn't really meant to play games, but it was meant for the everyday user who just wants to play HD video and do their taxes. But that doesn't stop a lot of gamers on a budget from playing games with the HD 530. As with the 750 Ti, it's a whole different story. This budget card by Nvidia is now available for about $100 new, has 640 CUDA cores, a base clock of 1.02 GHz, and a boost clock of 1.085 GHz. 750 Ti also has 40 texture mapping units and 1.87 billion transistors and a 28nm manufacturing process. Now the 750 Ti isn't an extravagant card by any means, but for only $100, it's great for HTPCs or light gaming. Now in this video, we're not exactly going to be focusing on light gaming too much, but we are going to throw a few games that this HD 530 might actually launch. The 4 games that I tested were Shadow of Mordor, CSGO, GTA 5, and Grid Autosport. I felt this was a fair selection of games that the HD 530 can handle and the 750 Ti can handle, so without further ado, let's get right into the benchmarks. Quick note, the CPU I have is an i5-6500, also my specs are linked down below if you want to check them out. Alright, so let's start off with Grid Autosport. The 750 Ti is totally playable with an average of 40 FPS while running in 1080p completely maxed out setting, including 10 times anti-aliasing. If you turn anti-aliasing off or down to X2, you could easily get up to a steady 60 FPS, so again, totally playable on 1080p, no problems there. Now the HD 530 on the other hand didn't handle the game so well. I tried to launch the benchmark mode in 1080p, but the game refused to even try, so I had to bump it down to 720p. Keep in mind, I kept 8 times anti-aliasing on for the sake of equality, but again, if you turned it off, you would be able to get some much better frame rates, at least some playable ones, because 10 FPS looks more like screen updates than actual frames per second. Moving over to Shadow of Mordor, we get a totally playable, smooth frame rate of 50 FPS at 1080p with the 750 Ti. This is with everything maxed out except anti-aliasing, so yeah, totally playable without a doubt. But how did the HD 530 perform? Surprisingly well, actually. It exceeded my expectations personally. We got an average of 16.8 FPS, which, keep in mind, is with everything maxed out in 720p. In my personal opinion, 20 FPS is the threshold of playable. So turn down a couple of settings and you could easily break that 20 FPS threshold. Like I said, I benchmarked this game at 720p because, as with Grid Autosport, 1080p is totally undoable for Intel's cheap integrated graphics. So how did GTA 5 perform? Well, on the 750 Ti with everything maxed out except anti-aliasing and texture quality, which texture quality I bumped down to medium because our graphics card only has 2 gigs of VRAM, and if you want to go to high, it's going to cost you more than that, so we just went with medium. It ran at a very playable, smooth frame rate, just shy of 60 FPS and not going below 45, so very stable, great performance at 1080p. Now, I'm going to be honest, the HD 530 surprised me on this one. While it did only get an average of 16.5 FPS in benchmark mode, I was expecting something along the lines of 5 to 10. It's just borderline playable again, but turn your settings down just a tad and you can hit that 20 FPS mark easily. Keep in mind again that the HD 530 was run at 720p because again, 1080p is just totally unplayable. So since we're on a budget, we had to test CSGO, and when the 750 Ti steps in on 1080p maxed out, you can expect a solid 190 FPS. That will almost never dip below 100. I got 99 as my low, so pretty much never dipping below 100. Absolutely beautiful gameplay, no problems running CSGO at 1080p max out settings with the 750 Ti. Now with the HD 530, if you want to play CSGO on integrated graphics, it will run at a smooth frame rate, if you want to call it that. It's not great. You get about 47 FPS, which might seem decent, but people who play CSGO know that that probably is not going to cut it. So will it run CSGO? Yeah, just not very good in terms of CSGO. Still totally playable, but personally I would probably prefer at least 120 FPS. So is a separate graphics card worth it? Absolutely, in my opinion. You get much better performance in integrated graphics, and in some instances like Grid Autosport, you need a discrete GPU to be able to even run the game. If you plan on playing super light titles like CSGO, World of Warcraft, or League, and you're happy with about 40 to 50 FPS, you can probably get away with Intel's integrated graphics, but still in most games, it's night and day performance with a discrete GPU. Anyway guys, hope you learned something. Hope this video helped you make the decision on whether or not to buy a discrete GPU. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And until next time, thanks for watching.